especially here in Kenya, that there is no way this regime will win against the people, and therefore it is in their own interest, those who have the duty bearers, as you call them, to comply with the demands of the human beings called Kenyans. Because Kenyans are agitating for the rights within the very constitution that those duty bearers are suspending. Do you think we are learning that they can never win against the people?
Well, hopefully the lessons the leaders should take are exactly what you're saying, because some of us grew up in an environment whereby you were told the leaders everything, they know everything for you, and that facade became clear when people realized, no, the leader is not the epitome of knowledge and the fountain of knowledge and all the other stuff. We grew up being told to sing loyalty pledges to the leaders. I think now people should, those in power should know that, like you rightly say, at the end of the day, it is people, the people power that wins. And that's why we've been very clear in our constitution that we, the people, hold that sovereign power. And I think there's a lack of realization towards that. Let me give you an example why I'm saying this. You know, the current government, when it came to office, rode to power from a place of high promise and a lot of hope. It was actually, the campaign was based on, we're going to dismantle the old order, we are going to focus on the person at the bottom, we are going to raise everybody up. So the manifesto was very appealing. And if this government lived that manifesto and carried the people, because again, how do we treat a society's level of human rights compliance and development? It is by the way it treats its most vulnerable. So the message was spot on. We are going to focus on the most vulnerable, we bring them up, and we make sure that everybody comes up to par. And then there were other promises that were also made from a human rights perspective. Extrajudicial killings are going to be things of the past. In fact, the current regime said once they come into office, they'll form a commission of inquiry to investigate those deaths that had occurred in the previous regime. We were also told that no longer would we be required to communicate on WhatsApp. There'll be freedom of communication, freedom of expression, and all the other stuff. But I think once people get to power, somebody said sometimes that politicians campaign in poetry, then they govern in prose. So most of those promises that they made have not come to pass, but the people have jolted them. People told them, listen, you said you're bringing us from the bottom, you're bringing us up. You'll form an inquiry. The human rights community is still asking. There are those unresolved deaths, Rivayala, issues to do with the post-election violence, although the reparation framework has tried to address some of those issues. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you cannot bottle people's desire to live true to human rights, a people's desire to demand from their leaders, as it is required of them, to live in line with Chapter 6 that calls for integrity from these leaders. And at the end of the day, I fully agree with you that we, the people, will always have the final word. But
I mean, quickly, I'm thinking of what would be a last question here, is that, do you need a certain level of nationalistic maturity to then be able to respect things like human rights? When we look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we start with eat, sleep, shelter, and that. Self-actualization comes at the top. Would you say that there's a competition in terms of priority, that we're not going to look at that for the moment? Let's look at these other things. Once we develop them, we can start thinking about how you feel.
That is escapist. And actually for me, if we were to apply the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the biggest problem we have in this country is leaders who get into political office not for self-actualization, but they're still battling with the other things, the necessities and all this. So they go there to accumulate. They treat the state as if it was a personal enterprise to benefit from. So at the end of the day, if we were to subject this to Maslow's theory, that nationalistic fiber will come from a group of leaders. I hate to use this because it sounds a little bit elitist, but then the so-called talented 10th, who are going to be very committed to driving the country forward, so that the bigger people, the wider people occupying the bottom of the pyramid can then come up. Our leaders should be agonizing. How do we move our people from those basic needs to safety, to security, and all this? They shouldn't be fighting and scrambling with the people in that space, treating them as if they are enemy combatants and really trying to work on them. Yes, nationalistic, the biggest duty is on the leaders, because the leaders are supposed to have certain skills and competencies. And in a country that really believes so much in a divine providence, to whom much is given, much is expected. Our leaders have been given much by the citizens of this country. So nationalistic behavior and all this should start from them, in the way they plan, in the way they run the country, in the way they treat the citizens, and then that way they lift those ones at the bottom